our guest of honor today has worked on practically everything. I do not I do not say that lightly. I'm going to go into games first. So first, let's start off with Rage. Oh my goodness. Stranglehold. Ages Beyond Mist. The Path of the Shell. Mist 5. Black Site. Area 51. Blitz. Ballers, Mortal Kombat versus DC. And by the way, I'm leaving a bunch of credits out because
They
we don't
released
have
it
time
too.
for everything. Extremely long list. So some of the awesome live action TV series, mostly films that Stephan has worked on includes Foundation, one of my favorite shows on streaming currently, Guardians of the Galaxy, I, Robot, Tomorrowland, The Suicide Squad, Independence Day Resurgence, Avengers, Age of Ultron, 300, Rise of an Empire, Total Recall from 2012, Tron Legacy, Star Trek, Star Wars Episode 2 and 3, Ready Player One, Alita, Battle Angel 1, and has worked on theme parks with the top theme parks. Of course, that is Disney Imagineering, having contributed to the Pirates of the Caribbean, Avatar, Star Wars. Holy smokes. Not only that, but I
Best.
just want to also add on here that Stephan has worked on over 150 book covers and also a whole bunch of animation as well. We'll get into that too, but just a little bit with that. Hey Arnold, oh my goodness, so many memories. Spider-Man, the animated series, Inspector Gadget, Titan AE, literally, like I said, has done everything. That's why we are so pleased to have our wonderful guest here, the one and only Stephan Martinière. Thank you so much for gracing
Well,
us with
thank
your
you.
presence.
Thanks for having me. I think you just spent your 2 hours right there. So, so, so
I
yes,
told you it's going to
it's
be a
a
big one.
pleasure. It's a pleasure always. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be able to share and answer all your questions for 2 hours.
Oh my goodness. What an amazing opportunity. And like I said, we skipped on a
Oh
bunch
yeah,
of credits. So if you like
yes.
to delve in deeper, delve in deeper. Now, I figured we could start off with a little bit of background and experience so that people can get to know you a little bit better. Because also, I also want to mention probably the most important thing here is that you have a schoolism class coming out, a schoolism course, concept art, creative process with Stephan Martinière, films, TV games, book covers, holy smokes. That's coming out
Everything.
March 12th, everybody.
Yeah. Everything. Well, I try to put everything in it. So yes, that's going to be heavy, big package. Hopefully exciting.
Definitely. Definitely. It sounds like a must if for every artist. So, like I said, I want to ask you first about a little bit about your background and experience. I want to ask, like, can you share a little bit about your journey in the concept art world and how it led you to teach this course?
It's interesting. You approached me years ago at the Comic-Con, I remember, and I was already thinking about teaching at the time. But I was not quite sure how I wanted to approach that because it's kind of funny when you think about it. I was there at the very beginning of digital. Craig Mullen and I, we kind of like pretty much kind of kickstarted that whole big trend. But then what I didn't do, which he did, and a lot of people did after me, was doing all these very quick 2 hour DVD, quick paintings and things like that, which, was very exciting for students out there because that was the first time, artists could expose themselves to their work and share it. But by the time I was kind of figuring out class, everybody had done it. So, and because my technique and how I've been using Photoshop like Craig was not necessarily very unique because everybody had picked up on it, I said, I'm not going to be doing 2 hours of a video because, I'm using so little tools of a Photoshop kind of palette that I'm not going to really show anything new in 2 hours. And then that's when you approach me, because I says, I'd like to, if I teach, I'd like to do something more in depth, really kind of share my experience, not necessarily the tools that I'm using, because they're pretty much the same, Photoshops and other kind of art softwares. It's more about the process, the thinking process, and all these things that are unique to each artist. And I said, I think that's what I would like to talk about. What makes, for example, what I do, my stuff and not someone else, what makes my approach unique? Why do I think that way? Like any other, great artist out there. And so 2 hours was never going to cut it. And so you approach me and he says, oh, but I got the perfect thing for you. I got these 9 hours chunk video, and on top of what, you can get the one-on-one. You could share more in depth with whoever's interested in really getting some deeper feedback for the whole process. And I said, that to me was really interesting. The problem is, like, that was like six or 7 years ago, right? Because I got so busy, and we're all so busy, it took me a long time to find the time to put it. So it was always in the back of my mind. I said I will do it. It's just I never found, the time, because, it's a lot of work, putting together 9 hours of class, in depth, to really explore that whole process and the thinking, that goes beyond all that, what was especially when you want to talk about all the things that I've done, because I could have talked about just book covers, or, a painting for a film, something like that, and break it down in one session. But I really wanted to share something more, bigger in scope in terms of, what I can offer. So COVID happened, and the shutdown in the industry and the Hollywood strike, and that was a perfect timing, kind of like these guys in Blessing. I says, I got an opportunity here. I have a window that I have to grab and do it, and that's what I did. That's what I wanted. So I wanted to do it for a long time, and the time came right, and I jumped on it, and now you have it. It's ready to go.
That was one of the big silver linings with the whole lockdown and everything. It's like,
I know.
yeah.
It's like that was the time for a break, and I said, then I was thinking, oh shoot, and now what? Knock on doors and try to find who. And after the end, I says, why am I stressing? I got that class who's been waiting for me, begging. You are waiting for me. And I says, this is it. This is it. I got to do it now, because it's a perfect timing. And so that just came out right.
Oh yeah. And like, in terms of the sci-fi genre, oh my gosh, you pretty much touched every major franchise for decades.
Yeah.
So I could just imagine how busy you are. And of course, the busier you are, the more I'm salivating, going, I need that course. So
It's interesting too, because I was thinking about that, and it would have been kind of a missed opportunity after all these years. I mean, 30, 40 years of working in pretty much everything, starting animations, going theme parks, doing comics, doing films, TVs, and all these things. I said, I want to share all that stuff, but it's a big chunk, so I had to find a way to break it down that it makes sense. And I think really the glue to all these things was the process, the thinking process that goes behind every single aspect of all these different subjects, because that's what makes it attractive. And in some ways, I think that's what made me kind of successful in an industry, is because I could jump back and forth between doing cartoons and realistic and animation, theme park and stuff. But I think one of the things that the clients have always been interested is the label Martinière. Why do we want Martinière instead of someone else? And because there was, I think, all this process of ideas that I can bring to the table when someone calls me, having good skill. A lot of artists have really great skills. I'm not the only one out there. But when you can bring a thinking process and ideas, and you can really enhance a participation into a project, I think that's what clients are always very attracted. And I think that's what I wanted to share. how you approach all these different subjects, if you're interested in different aspects of the industry, in a successful way that makes you relevant in every single aspect of that industry, and makes clients happy all the time. And so that was the exciting part of it, I think.
Well, and also, there's a lot of people that do sci-fi or concept art or things that are similar to the themes that you have worked on, but there's less than 10 people, maybe less than 5 people at the level that you're at. I gotta say, because there are levels to this stuff, and some go beyond the tip of the mountain. Very, very few, and you're one of them in the sky that we all
Thank
look
you.
at and
I,
be
I
like, wow.
appreciate that. I appreciate that. And hopefully that class is going to multiply that and you could add a 0 to that list. And that's the point. That's the point, right?
Yes.
You get so much stuff you want to share at some point, and it's about the joy of a journey that you've made, and who can benefit from it at the end, because it's like what they say, passing the baton. It's like, okay, you've done your part. I mean, I'm still there. I'm still retired. I mean, I don't think I'll ever retire, but there is all that wealth that I want to share, because it's exciting, and also because it's interestingly, and I touched a little bit on that class, and I came out actually completely out of the left field, is what's happening with AI. And AI is changing, things, and it's going to change our industry. And I had to think a lot about that, and all my friends for the last year, and it's been evolving so fast. But how do you deal with that software? But what the capability of that, what is being able to be done with AI? And really, at the end, when I was looking at it, I says, well, yes, it's a tool. It's a great tool. It could do some really interesting things for concept and concept work, and help artists in that process. But it doesn't change really what makes you as an artist and what makes you unique in that process. And so if you start approaching it as a tool, then is a way to really enhance your arsenal as a concept artist, the same way Photoshop did, when it came out. In the same way, when you think about it, when the camera came in, camera did not change the whole world. I mean, it did in some ways, but it opened up an industry. Even artists jumped on it and used it for models, for taking. I mean, it was, when you see it smartly and how it could benefit you and benefit your growth as an artist, then that's when it makes sense, and that's something that I wanted to talk about too, because it is happening. You can't avoid it. I mean, the genie's out of a box. So how do you now use it to your benefit as an artist and still grow with it, and not just call it the answers to everything and then the death of everything at the same time? So it's a very interesting time that we're in right now.
Yeah. Of course, everybody has been talking about AI, not just artists, but also programmers, and things like that. And I have schoolism. I would still hire a programmer, hopefully, like, whatever about AI can help their job become easier, but I would never want to just try to do everything myself now because I have some AI tool, so like, I still feel like, yeah, artists will still be needed, and perhaps, kind of like what computer animation and that time period did for studios, like all these smaller studios start sprouting up everywhere.
Yes,
Hopefully
exactly.
this is going to give a lot of power to the creators,
Exactly. And I
um,
think that's the way to look at it. It's like it was scary at the beginning because everybody freaked out, panicked. On top of that, there's a whole copyright issue and all that stuff, and the legal aspect of it that just came out too fast for people to be able to react to it. But at the end, it's like everything else, like Photoshop, like you said, it's like the 3D animation coming out. Is it going to replace and destroy 2D animation? It changed it, but then it also enhanced it in one way, and it didn't kill 2D animation. You still have tons and tons of 2D animation. It creates a new niche in the industry, a new avenue that some people are going to use one way and other people are going to use another way, and there's all these places in between that it's going to be useful. and try to figure out, how it's going to be creating something valuable for the art community. I mean, I'm looking at it for me, not necessarily from an artistic standpoint, but from a video standpoint. Right now, I'm more interested about what it could be allowing an artist like myself, for example, who has been a director in animation, knowing how much of a structure and manpower, for example, you need to create an animation short or even a feature film, and what AI could be able to do from a creative standpoint to allow you to create a very personal project that now you need maybe a few people, not hundreds like it used to be. That to me is exciting in terms of how it could change filmmaking in that process. And yes, it's true, you're going to always have a side of the industry that's going to take it the easy way, and another side who's going to want it to exploit it creatively to create some exciting new territory. With what's happening with digital art in the gallery realm right now out there. It's taking a hold and it's becoming more and more looked at, where 5 years ago, nobody wanted to touch it because they didn't know how to really combine it with an artistic vision and mix that technology to create something different, exciting, that could become the new hot thing out there. So it's very evolving, when you think about it. There's a new
Yes.
technology, everybody's excited, everybody freaks out. How do you deal with it? It happens too fast, so you don't have the time to react. So obviously you got to figure it out. But after a while, I think you realize that there's good and bad. There's a good middle ground to make something very valuable out of all that.
Well, I think not to delve into this too much, but since we're here, I think the main issue for many of us is it kind of breaks the ecosystem, where it's like an artist, tries, fails for years, then starts to pick up and starts to get it and starts to get inspired or whatever, and starts to create something new that the world has never seen before, their own unique style. And if it takes, 10, 15 years to get to something absolutely incredible, and it takes a week or a couple weeks for AI to steal that and get trained and be able to make art just by typing in Stephan Martinière, I feel like that should be illegal, because just like defamation, right?
Mhm.
If you say something bad about somebody or do something to somebody where it affects their income, that
Sure.
should be looked at very carefully, and
Yes.
regulation should happen.
And this is what they're dealing in right now, because everybody was caught, with their pants down when that happened. So
Right.
obviously, nobody had the time to think about what the implication was. But in some ways, it's no different because it was already happening before AI. Someone ripping someone off and signing a name or copying and that is not a new thing. So AI made it worse, and maybe even more obvious because it happened so fast and it was offering more and more. But the issue will be dealt with. Obviously people will find a way because they have to, and it'll settle down, and there will be, regulations, and there will be a middle ground where everybody kind of can navigate, without being afraid of anything. I know eventually, yes, I mean, it's already happening. In some ways, I'm lucky so far, and I cross my fingers because of being so eclectic in all these industries. If you type Stephan Martinière and you try to play with an AI trying to copy Stephan Martinière, you don't get much of anything because there's nothing. It's in some ways,
You do so many different things.
this is so many
How can
different
it
things.
figure it out?
The AI hasn't figured me out yet in terms of what makes Stephan Martinière. So yeah, you could see an idea, you could see stuff, but I haven't seen anything that makes me freak out and says, "Oh my God, I'm like left out." So that's one of the things I'm touching in the classes in terms of exploring different things, as an artist, especially as a concept artist in a field that's very wide in terms of allowing you to have different opportunities, different ways to kind of jump from one area to another because of different circumstances, because you might have to, you know, uh, and so having that opportunity to play with different style, different ideas, exploring different things, kind of broaden your spectrum, gives you more opportunities, uh, and then makes the AI much more difficult to catch you in the process. So far, I cross my fingers, but I'm not in the target thing. It's like, oh yeah, no, we don't need him anymore. I can get it 2 minutes. But I know it's a problem for many people. When you have a style that is so strong and powerful, like many artists, take Frank Frazetta, for example, yes, that's going to be a lot easier. And so that's where you need, like you said, a legal system and a control system to be able to, regulate so that that doesn't happen.
Hey, since so many of your subjects, for the projects that you gravitate towards, deal with the future, do you think about the future a lot? Do you have any predictions of where things might go
It's tough
that we
because
haven't
I
talked
always
about?
felt I was never born in the right time because I'm always thinking about the future.
Hmm.
So it's always like I want to see what's not there yet, or what I've read in science fiction books, and what you've seen in movies, and you always see, I'd like to see myself there. So, there's that fantasy, yes. But no, it's like I am where I am. I create what I create, so it creates that fantasy, at the present. And yes, there's part of me sometimes who wish that I could see what's happening, and I could be there 100 years from now, knowing what's happening slowly, that you could see the outcome, and be there, So, but then if you start thinking this way, it's like every century, every 10 years, there is a new revolution that you had not even imagined. And now you can kind of project yourself and says, oh my God, I wish I could be here 50 years to see what it's going to be. And then. So it's kind of like never ends. So no, I think I'm happy right now where I am.
So no predictions,
So no,
foundation is
and
based off of
honestly,
prediction. Right?
and frankly, it's so difficult right now because, you look at the what's going on around the world. I mean, it could go sideways so many ways. It's so difficult to predict. So, I I always hope for the best. I can, maybe I'm an optimist at heart, and the more you see, the difficulties and what's going on around the world, the more I hope I'm right because, sometimes it's not pretty out there. But, we're artists, we want to look at the world, with beauty and hope, and that's what I do all the time when I do work. It's like I got to disengage myself from the politic, but I cannot also disengage myself from it. So I participate in my own way because I'm an artist. I'm not a political, I'm not in that current, but I am also part of it. So we give the best way we can. Yeah. So prediction, I guess I hope for the best. So that's it.
Well, speaking of hopes, when you're designing this course, what are some of the outcomes that you hope to be able to give to a lot of the artists that take the course?
I I wanted to give artists the chance to learn from me what I did not have a chance to learn when I was younger, because of not only the wealth of information that's available and the technology that allows me now to be able to create a class such as yours, you know, uh, which was impossible before, and also give access to a knowledge that took me years and years to acquire because the technology was not there, because it was much harder to get. And so there's something kind of exciting about the idea that now I can talk about how it used to be before and how it is now, and share so that students that don't have necessarily to struggle all the way, the way I struggle to get there, and be able to get there faster with a clearer understanding and much more tool at their disposal to be able to become successful artists. You know, when I remember, I mean, when I started, I mean, there was not even the internet. The internet was not there. So imagine the explosion and the change in that whole industry with the internet. Just even the way you present your portfolio and you showcase your work and you reach out to people and find out, you know, out there where people are and how you connect, you know, to the industry. Man, I was walking with my book, knocking on doors, and I did not know 1% of what was out there because, you know, you're confined in one area and the world is where you are. You know, today you have this wealth of, you know, technology, research possible, contact you can make. The world is much more open to allow artists to have access to it. And that's what I'm trying to kind of teach students out there, you know, what I've learned, what's possible to do, and what are the good things right now, and share that experience.
Fantastic. Now, I'm sure every lesson is very valuable, but when you think about the highlights of your course, can you describe a particular module, a lesson in your course that you're most excited about, and why?
I wouldn't say there is one in particular because everything is interconnected. Because it's all about a thinking process that you apply as a discipline that relates to every subject you do, that you touch. So it's a very systematic process. But what's the most exciting is about how you can develop that thinking process that helps you kind of create things that are much more efficient, relevant, and exciting. And at the same time as you're doing that, how you keep in mind the growth process artistically, to me, which was a kind of the path and the goal. It's like you're learning a process that helps you think in a very kind of unique way to be relevant to different aspects of the industry in terms of how you approach the thinking before you even start working on a project, so that you prepare yourself for the subject matter, and then how you start then applying certain system to step-by-step develop the work that needs to be created. And at the end of the day, how that makes you grow incrementally as an artist. So it's about learning in a very kind of linear way for something that's very specific to your path and a career, something that makes sense, but it's also projecting where all this is going to lead you with other avenues that you might not have necessarily thought about at the very beginning, because it's always about an artistic evolution. Never contain yourself to one way of doing things, for example, or, you know, one technique and, you know, I have my foot in the door and now I'm good. I'm always kind of emphasizing the fact that never always challenge yourself. Never stop right there when you think you have it done or that you think you're there. It's like when you think it's there, then put it aside. And then now take the other track, try something new. Always kind of push yourself by learning new things, exploring new things, because it always kind of like, it always goes back. It's like a circle. Whatever new things that you learn will benefit even more what you've learned to get there. And then that evolution process can only make you grow. To me, that's the exciting part of it. That's the only reason actually I continue doing it. And I don't even see myself ever stopping it, because it's always changing. And in these days now, even more so than 20, 30 years ago, because the technology has changed our lives so much in terms of the new things that are possible that were never possible before, what the technology is capable of giving us artistically, and the door that it opens, not only in the industry that you're in, I think just about the technology and how the technology, like for example, 3D has changed. And now everybody pretty much uses 3D for concept, because if you don't, you lose, because you fall behind, because it's such a relevant tool for a concept artist to have, that you have to embrace it. But that's a step, it's a leap you have to take as an artist. The same way I took that leap with when I first met Craig Mullins as a very good example. I was a traditional artist by trade. All my training was traditional. And one day I had a computer that I was using for my email, because it was start happening out there. There was nothing really major here. I was still doing my work traditional. Then I'm working on that project with a production designer who was working with Greg on a theme park in Las Vegas. And I was doing the concept work because I was good at drawing. I was not a painter at that time. I was a concept designer by drawing it. And so the guy hired me to do these very detailed, very complicated environments for that Star Trek ride for Las Vegas. And he had Greg as a painter. And he showed me the painting. And when I saw a painting, I said, "Oh my God, what is this?" And so I picked up the phone, I called Greg, and I says, "What the hell? How did you do something like that? It was so beautiful." And Greg says, "It's Photoshop." And Photoshop just happened, like it was a Photoshop version 4 at the time, and they had just came up with a layer process system that made painting so much easier. So I said, "Greg,
but you can only make like 3 layers before your computer crashes."
Well, there was that, but get this, I think Craig figured it out. And so I said, "Okay, so give me the list, give me the shopping list." So Greg says, "Okay, so you're gonna need I was at the time was an Apple 8500. You need that hard drive, you need that kind of tablet, you need that kind of connections, you need." So I had like a list of $10,000 of equipment, $10,000. But the thing is, I did not even flinch 1 second. Next day, I was ordering from CompUSA $10,000 of equipment, because I just knew when I saw it that this was the future. This Photoshop was going to change the entire industry. I saw it. Greg was there at the beginning. He was doing all this matte painting stuff. And as a concept artist, I said, this is perfect, because not only it totally relates to what I'm doing, but it's going to enhance my career. It's going to allow you to become a painter, which I wanted to do, because before that I was really more drawing, and I did not hesitate. So I embraced the technology right on, knowing already I was projecting. I didn't know, but I was projecting. And sure enough, I mean, the rest. I mean, it's like, Greg was doing my painting. I was more into the concept stuff. When I was working on Titan AE, I remember bringing my computer at the office, and everybody was like, "What is that stuff?" And I was showing them what I was doing with Photoshop, and everybody picked up on that. And it's a very small industry. After that project, the whole industry changed. The whole industry changed. Everybody saw the benefit of that technology and what it could bring and change to the concept world. And now we're into a new technology. So then Photoshop became now a big thing. 3D happened. Same thing. I saw 3D. I said, you can't miss that boat. It's going to change everything.
Which programs do you use?
3D Studio Max. I've tried several, actually, because at the beginning I was actually, I wanted to stick with one, but because I was moving from companies to companies and I was in the game industry, I was getting into the game industry. Every game company was using different software. So I started, with one, then I was moving to another company. Yes, I know we're not using this one. You have to use this one. Then you have to use this one. So at the end, I said, okay, I got to pick one for myself because otherwise I'll never get, and spend the time to learn it. So 3D Studio Max became my software. And I'm using different ones right now for rendering, different one for lighting and stuff, I'm combining all that stuff. But all that to say that, that's part of a growing process I'm talking about. Take the chance, never stop, never think that you've reached the end. There's always something new that's going to surprise you. And it says, oh my God, when that happens, then you need to explore it. You need to try it. You need to go for it because it's going to change things. And it always does in one way or another. AI right now, how do we deal with that? But, it's going to change things and it's going to become part of a tool set. And we're going to learn to kind of use it the right way as artists. And after that, what's next? I don't know yet. I'm just waiting for it. I think I'll be ready when it comes.
Well, something I saw recently that looked really cool was this artist, she had Apple Vision Pro on, right? And she's looking at a blank canvas and she projects her drawing over top of this blank canvas and then turns down the opacity. So it's like 50%. And the image stays there no matter if she moves her head or whatever. And then she just starts painting it, pretty much tracing it, does it in a fraction of the time.
Yeah.
Are you thinking at all about experimenting with something like that, Apple Vision Pro or Quest for creating art?
All the time. All the time. And that's what's so crazy in some ways is because I only have so much time and the technology is changing so fast with all this new stuff out there. I mean, even VR and how you can model in VR, you can paint in VR. I've seen some stuff. Even as crude as it is today, you could see the potential. It's amazing what's going to be, available and what you can do with that kind of thinking and how you project, this kind of technology. And even more so because I'm thinking more and more about, aside from my career doing work for concept and films and all these guys out there, I'm also thinking for myself and in terms of art for galleries, doing things I've never done before that are different from what I've done all my life. So I'm doing a lot of abstract explorations, both in 3D and in 2D. So I'm thinking more gallery, it's a whole different realm. It's a whole different animal in itself. But the technology is coming in to that whole world. And with digital, with projections, with these kinds of tools, how now it's not about a painting on the wall anymore, but it's about an experience. And galleries are becoming now experimental spaces. You could now imagine paintings that are alive, that moves, that are part of the whole wall, for example. That's not just a static thing. Scott, at some point, a friend of mine from LA, was talking about doing books that way with technology, where the book is now an interactive tool. It's a story that you live, that images in there are moving, that you could zoom in, you could pull. I mean, all that stuff. The technology, we have it. We have not yet utilized it to that degree, but it's there. And it's going to happen. More and more people are going to figure things out, make it easier, because that's the big thing. Make it easy so that everybody can have access, and give an artist a tool when it's easy to use. My God, it's like sky's the limit. And that's what's crazy right now. That's what I love about it. So yes, I do think about it a lot. Yes, I do.
You know what I think about with when I saw the Vision Pro come out and everything, I was thinking you could sculpt something and then place it over top of like a block of marble, and now you have kind of like training wheels for sculpting as well, which is kind of mind-boggling to think about.
Yeah, yeah. Even what you could do with 3D printing right now. I'm so interested in 3D printing because there's so much stuff I've created as a concept artist that I would love to see as objects, sculptures, whether it's a creature, a spaceship, or even something else. And 3D printing is still at the beginning, but I mean, when you think about where it was 2 years ago, man, it's already so much cheaper and so much more affordable and easier to use than it was before. The same way, printing was completely untouchable 10, 15 years ago, because if it was an iris printer, then you couldn't do it. Now everybody has a printer. It costs nothing, to buy a printer. So the more the technology becomes affordable and available, I think the more it's going to get exciting in terms of enhancing and creating more stuff for you as an artist. Yeah.
Something that something that I always something I always thought about with your line of work, especially, is you know, I look at your work and I could just picture the directors going, "Oh my God, I loved Age of Ultron, or I loved Fifth Element. I want something as amazing as that, but doesn't look like that."
Mm.
Right? And like they want their own version of the
Oui.
Martinière future.
Mm.
Like that must get difficult, no? Like how do you keep coming up with different kind of
Yeah.
concepts that are on paper, they could feel quite similar, right?
Do you
But
know
then your ideas are
it,
completely different.
it's interesting. It's a very interesting question because that line from a producer, from a director who says, "I want to see something I've never seen before," you hear it all the time because
Right.
they all want their own thing. So yes, they've seen that. They said this, but
Feels
not that. No.
familiar,
Oh
but
yeah, no.
nobody's ever seen this
I
before.
hear that left and right. Oh, this, but it's not this. It's like when I was working, for example, on knowing Proyas calls and he says, "I love what they did on the Abyss, but I don't want to do the Abyss. But I like the idea of translucency, transparency. So this is what I like, but this is what I don't want. So this is what they're telling you. So yes, it's tough. But I think my answer to all that has always been the same, is that you do not create something original in a sense that it's never been seen before. That's just a fantasy. Really, the truth is like you always reinvent what is already out there. You're just giving it a different flavor and a different shape. But the ingredients already exist around you. They're in nature, they're everywhere. It's like a Lego box. All these pieces are there, but you give that box to one person, it's going to do something very different from the next one because how they assemble all these different elements. The elements are the same, but it's now your imagination and based on how, and again, that goes back to what I'm trying to teach in my class, that thinking process, how you analyze and you extract the kind of information that is essential to understand the subject matter of your work that you have to do, that allows you to do the right research to come up with the ideas and the imagery that is going to be giving you all the extra juice and ideas. But now, as an artist, you're going to reimagine to create something different. But different, it's going to be still connected to something familiar. You cannot do something that is so weird that nobody understands. That's just, and in my class, I mentioned that, in one of the chapter, you take Alien, the creature Alien, for example. That is the perfect example of an incredible concept that is absolutely recognizable in every single pieces that you can look at. It's how it was assembled as a whole that makes it so beautiful, unique, and frightening at the same time. But you look at every component of an alien, you understand exactly what they are. There's no mystery to it. The phallic nature of the head, the claws, the aggressive nature of some elements that are part of the visual language to make something aggressive, the colors, the shape of the pose, everything is there. But you dissect the element, you say, oh yeah, and that's why it's so frightening, is because you can relate to it. This is what actually, which is what is funny, because when the director says, I want to see something I've never seen before, he says, no, you do not want something you've never seen before, because nobody is going to understand it. You want something that is smart in terms of how you reimagine it, so that it's going to be your signature. It's going to be you. Say, oh yes, Alien is only one, and it's associated with Ridley Scott, and there's no one else. So how do you create the next Godzilla, for example, or the next whatever? and give it a flavor that everybody's going to now say, oh my God, that's the new thing. But no one has done any better than Alien since Alien. Which is interesting when you think about it. How do you top this one? And I don't know, I always think about it. It's like, how could you do better than Alien, right? Everybody tries. And there's some good stuff out there, some really good stuff. But to that perfection, it took that kind of crazy mind, of Geiger
Pushed it to a limit.
do something
Yeah.
so weird. And actually, that's the brilliance of a guy like Ridley Scott, to tap into these type of artists, as opposed to,
Right.
okay, I'm going to go after a concept guy from the film industry who is used to a particular system of thinking and a process. I'm going to tap and hire someone that has nothing to do with it and who's going to give me something completely unexpected. And that's what he got. And that was brilliant. Yeah.
Well, let's dive into that a little bit, because inspiration is very important. We all get inspiration from different places, but I found that there are so many top-level artists, when you ask them and really delve in, not like, oh, I just look it up on Google or whatever. Like when you really delve into specific things that they designed and where the inspiration came from, a lot of times it's like, oh, that spaceship, it actually came from some 50s gearbox that I saw, things that are completely opposite.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that resonate with you?
It does all the time, because it's always based on, well, it's always connected to the story. When director approaches you and he has a script, and this is, what the vibe of it, and a production designer is taking control of a visual and has a vision to it, there's always a drive already there that exists. They never come to you and says, I have no idea what I want, and do whatever you want. No, there's always a drive that connects to things that relate to a certain aspect of design that appeals to the director and the production designer, always with the idea that it has to connect to an audience. So you cannot really veer off so much, because you have these guidelines that are very specific. After that, it's a question of taste. When someone approaches me and I want to do something retro, something that has a little bit of flavor of this or that, because everybody picks up from things that they already know. Can't pick up from what you don't know. So that's where the influence and the inspiration comes from. You already have a script that tells you visually what the director and the production designers are interested in. And once you have these key elements, that's part of my class, that dictates a very specific way of thinking in terms of a breakdown to create a list that is going to give you access to imagery that are going to be inspiring to you. The trick artistically is that once you have that, how do you now turn it into something that is going to be different, exciting, not the same? And that's where you start reassembling pieces in another way, keeping in mind what the goal of that particular design is, whether it's an environment, a creature, a vehicle, and what it's supposed to convey to the audience. Because all that is part of a narrative. The narrative is a big piece of it. The narrative tells you, this is what it needs to say, this is what it needs to do, so this is what I need to search for in order to exactly fulfill that. And it's a very, it's analytic. It's analytic. You analyze the content of what needs to be done. You create that list. You break it down. You research, and after that, your imagination kicks in. Based on what you see. That's why I always tell students, like, research, always research, because there's a wealth out there of information that I never had, when I was a kid. Even when I was starting school at stuff, if I had that wealth of information, I think I would have turned it different. I don't know what I would have done, but having that access to research is what triggers your imagination. And so when you have a process that's kind of clear on how you use that process to enhance your imagination and create, something really exciting, that to me is successful. you know, and I think that's a process, that you can learn, you know, and what makes someone, more um, more sought after than another. Uh, why do you go after me? Why do you go after Craig Mullins? Why do you go after Chris Voss, Sid Mead, all these guys out there? Well, because they have a style that appeals to a director or a production designer. But really, I think all of us, and many of us, I mean, think similarly in some ways, and apply a process that needs to be efficient in its own way, with a particular unique style. My style is different from Sid Mead, that is different from anyone else. But what we produce and what we come up with always kind of is successful because it follows a process that makes sense, in order to make the client happy and be on target, with a narrative. If that answers
Awesome.
better.
Yeah. I want to talk about color, really. Like the variety of color is kind of minimal, right? Most of it is monochromatic. So do you actually do any color keys for this, or do you just kind of have your concept in mind and you just go straight into it?
I just go straight into that, yeah. But what I do before I would go straight into that is I would have a truckload of references to know where I'm going. So that's my research. That's part of what I was talking earlier, is research, so that I have a good feel about the mood, the light, what is cool in terms of what I can find in terms of references that gives me the guide in terms of what I need to approach. And some of the paintings, I would not even have to do a color key because I have a very kind of, I would say, matte painting kind of approach to my painting process because of Photoshop. So I could find references that are actually great source of reference in terms of light and mood that are going to be my foundation to create a quick sketch and allow me to kind of progress from that and kind of work my composition as I'm working the painting. Um, I don't have a particular kind of one way always to do things. I think every painting and every subject kind of dictates how I like to approach that. So some paintings are much more organic in terms of my approach, where I would kind of like go with an idea. I have a narrative that could be coming from a script, from a book cover, excerpt and things like that. And so I do research, and once I have a feel for it, I start putting a whole bunch of things together to start building that painting, and let it kind of what I call surprise me every step of the way, always keeping in mind what I'm looking for. So sometimes my composition happens as I'm painting, because certain elements that I could use and import and manipulate into the I would say the canvas kind of gives me ideas on the spot about a composition that could be actually better than what I was thinking about. Uh, so yeah, I do sometimes a very little quick scribble to place my main subject. Like I want for example, here, I want my submarine to be right there. And I want my characters in the foregrounds, and I want to have that feel about, you're inside that cave and there's that big opening. But I don't go too deep into that. I start painting, and then as I'm starting manipulating and bringing elements, I would know what feels right. And I go with that, and I build layers after layers, and I let that kind of painting process kind of always dictates what's the next thing to do, which is one way I approach a lot when I do book covers, because there's a freedom of expression as an artist. But I would not do that for film, because films is much more demanding, much more specific in terms of what needs to be in that shot, because sometimes it is a set that needs to be built. So I would approach it very differently, maybe with some sketches that would go through approval process with the production designers, then get into 3D to kind of block out the space, because we know there's going to be a certain amount of space needed for camera, for the shot, for things. It's much more technical. Theme park is a little bit the same way too. There's different phases in projects between the blue sky where you throw ideas and it's just whatever you can come up with, which is the most exciting kind of part of it because it's free expressions, free for you to think out of a box. And then after that, there's the more technical aspect when it's figured out and now, okay, let's work that space. We like the idea. We like what you came up here. Now we need to figure out with that kind of dimensions, the space, where the actors are going to be, where the audience is. And so that becomes more technical. And so it's another type of process.
It's very interesting when you're talking about all that because I could just picture it in my head, as many of us probably can. You know, as you're messing around, as you're playing around, you start to see new ideas, you start to see new directions that you can go. But the thing is, a lot of times, like you said, with film especially, they can be very, very specific in exactly what they wanted, right? And so it must be kind of, it must be like you have to make some adjustments of your process when you're working on something that that invites happy accidents versus something that has to be very well planned out so that the sketch is very, very similar to the final product or something like that.
Yes. It's interesting what you're saying because it's true in a sense that it's not that same kind of artistic freedom of doing everything that you want, and it's about you as an artist. Like a painting like this, for example, it's purely free forms. I do whatever I want. I don't have to be specific about a particular design to please a particular art director or director for a film. It's an image that resonates with me because I want to explore my thing. So it's book covers. That's why doing book covers is so great. But when you are on a film and you have so much specific in terms of what you have to do, you put that aside. So when you become much more what you do that's going to give you that what you call the happy accidents is more about the design aspect of it, not the overall thing, but the mood, the light, the impressionistic style of that painting or whatever. It's more from a design perspective that you can be surprised because the space, like you said, is dictated. They're going to say it can be that this is you're confined with technical aspect you cannot deviate from. But the design within that space, that's where you have that kind of freedom. And that's where they usually are looking for you to surprise them by infusing a space that could be just basic, boring box or what have you, that has no personality per se, with a sense of design, a sense of mood and colors that's going to bring it to life, and that's going to give it a successful kind of impact, towards the audience. Like this, for example. I mean, this is a good example. The guideline was very specific in a sense that it has to be these beautiful gardens. So automatically, you're already gravitating towards Versailles, the French gardens, the English gardens. So you cannot already deviate from that. You have something that's very classic in its layout, and it says it's like Versailles. You want a chateau and a garden in front surrounding it. So you're already stuck with that. But where now you make a difference is the design of the castle. And all I had to work with at that time was just the idea that they wanted something brutalist in terms of architectural style. And the production designer gave me a whole bunch of reference from different architects, from the turn of the century, German architects, Russian architecture that's very brutalist. For inspiration. And that's where the idea about how you reimagine from what you have at your disposal, like a Lego box. So you have all these references, and now you reshape. So it's the idea of keeping so that's where the narrative and how you read the narrative and how you extract the right language, visual language that makes that right is so interesting, exciting in some ways, and relevant, is that you have to understand what makes, for example, brutalist and not Art Nouveau or Art Deco. What is the distinction between these styles that makes it such that it's all this or that? And once you analyze the components, the visual components, the architectural components that makes it, then you have a very good guidelines to go with. And after that, you can reshape. That's where the surprise happens. And it's where your sense of design kind of now kicks in. Because you cannot just be piling stuff because, okay, so I'm going to take this from this and it's all brutalist references and boom, it's a big pile of nothing. So then this is where your sense of architecture comes in, because it has to have a construction that makes sense. This is where your sense of composition makes it, the balance between elements of all these things that are part of a visual language that is part of, I would say, the design foundations that are important. They kick in to allow you to create a design that's pleasing, that's well organized, that's not chaotic, that makes sense when you look at it. That's like, you don't look at that and says, I don't get it. It's like a pile of blocks of stone or whatever. No, it has a sense of wanting to say something with a connection to an architectural language that you can understand. And the garden around, it's just the variations on shapes and design and stuff. There's really nothing necessarily original. What you do here is you create a mood piece, create a sense of light, a sense of, color and ambience. But really what primes here is that palace, that structure that's going to be the main focus of that. The garden, you read it as a garden and you win right away. Boom, it's done. So a tree is a tree. If you know Versailles and you've seen stuff, it's not complicated. The design and really and the payoff is on the palace.
I love how you say it's not complicated, because most people will look at this and go, what is he talking? Is he talking about that thing? That thing is hella complicated. So
And
is this from Foundation? Is this like the
yes,
Empire's?
yes,
Oh, I love
that's
it.
it. Yes, I thought
That's
you
the
picked it up exactly
location.
because you knew. No, yes, it is from Foundation. Yes, and
I
that's one of
love
the
it.
idea. That's
Oh
not
my
even
gosh.
the only idea. I had to explore 4 or 5 different designs, and I don't even actually know at the end if that which design, because honestly, I haven't watched the last season of it yet. But I
Oh,
know
it's
it's
fantastic.
I know it's done a lot inside. You see a lot of inside, and I've designed some of the interiors as well.
Mm.
But that's one other thing too when you work in film. Uh, they call you because they like what you do, because they like your sense of designs, architecture, what have you. But you're always part of a team. I'm always not the only one working. So that's a thing you learn when you work in film is you work in teams with other people who have different sense of design, different sensibilities, and the role of an art director, production designer is to utilize all these artists to get the best out of them, not necessarily saying I want a Martinière or I want a Sid Mead or I want a this or that. Is just to get the best out of all these guys and then create maybe what's necessary to do sometimes is a combination of all these. So some of your inspiration might inspire another artist to take it beyond and do something different that becomes a final product and vice versa. That's one of the aspects of film that's very unique to film is that you work in a team process that is not necessarily about your work and this is it, which is the case when you do book covers, for example, where it's just you and no one else. And it's your personality, your sensibility, your sense of design. It's whatever you want to do because they're not requiring, such precisions and detail. Like this one is a book cover. Uh, you know, I had the narrative, I had the script, I knew exactly what the story was. So obviously that helps a lot. But how you compose that image, it was just purely my decision. What matters to me as a storyteller when I paint and when I represent an image is my sensibility. It's actually something that I brought to the book cover industry that was not there before, which I didn't know. It's a surprise, and I talked to that a lot about in a class too, is that the impact you can have on an industry without knowing it by who you are and trying different things. Um, when I was when I approached the book cover industry, that was the last thing I've did in my career. So I had already been established in animation, film, games. I was already in that sphere, and I was very established then. I always wanted to do book covers because, that's always one thing that attracted me. And I used to read these books with these fabulous covers when I was a kid. So it's always in the back of my mind. But I came to book cover very late. So when I came to book cover, I came into it with that sense of film and cinematic and design aspect that was part of my training and my career. And so automatically, when I was thinking of an image, I was thinking about it cinematically. Big environments, big scenes, things that reveal a world. It's not about character. The character is there, but the character is a piece of a bigger canvas. And that's because that's what was natural to me. I come from a film. This is how you approach a film. This is, how you approach a concept for game. It's about narrative. It's about big ideas. What I didn't know is that the book cover industry at that time was very much into characters. It's all about the character. It's no cover. It's all that matters. The background is almost non-existent. There was only one guy that I knew, Michael Whelan, that was approaching it from that same perspective, not being from the film industry, and I was a big fan of actually Michael Whelan. So I brought that sensibility because of my background, and I also bring in the digital aspect because digital in the book cover didn't exist because all these artists were very traditional. And so I come out of a left field. I want to do that, and I had no idea it was going to completely reshape the book cover industry. Because what I did also it's kind of a cross-pollination process, because I was already in the film industry and stuff like this. Then the book cover allowed me to showcase my work a lot faster than what I could do in film, because in film, you're always under NDA. You can't show your work until maybe 5 years. And sometimes you cannot even do it because if a film is dead, unless you have permission from the studio to release the work, it's a can of worm. But book cover, because there's not these kinds of restrictions. It's you about as an artist, but the moment the book is out, and the work is yours, which is huge. You own the work. You don't own anything when you work for film, game, and stuff like that. So, that made a big difference. So I was able to bring that, and in response to that, show the book cover industry there is a new way to present a book cover, and then brought the concept world into the book cover industry. So now you can see a lot of concept artists from the film and game industry getting into the book covers because now it's accepted and people like it because they like now that diversity, that it's not just about a big character in the front cover with a big title because it's all about the writer's name, but there is a sense of story with an image that you can bring into that. And that to me seemed so obvious when I did it, but it was not really. And it took me a while to figure out, oh my God, I'm doing something that's kind of different. It's really picking up because actually it's new. And I didn't even think about it when I was doing it because it was just automatic from my background. And that kind of reshaped a little bit, an industry that was thinking only one way, which is weird when you think about it, because you would think, between the book cover industry and the film industry, there would be a cross-pollination of ideas and stuff, but there was not. The film was the film. Book cover was its own world, with its own roster of artists, with its own way of thinking, its own way of imagining and representing, imagery. And there was no connection, which is kind of funny. Somewhere, sometimes you don't think about it and you think it's obvious and it's not so obvious.
That's what makes you kind of a unicorn. What is this one for then? This I want to keep up there because I don't feel like I really see sketches from you at this stage as much.
Well, that's what I do when I do sketch for creatures. Creature, well, I approach it different ways, but for this in particular, what was required was for an advertising project that wanted a creature that would remind the audience but not necessarily reminded, actually, but they brought up in a conversation Audrey from the Little Shop of Horror. And they wanted to create a creature in that kind of idea, in a sense that they wanted something scary but funny. And so they said, obviously, we don't want Audrey, but we'd like you to propose some designs. So, I'm a traditional artist, and so I will never kind of leave paper and pen on the side. I always, whenever I have a chance to do it, and I love designing creature on paper whenever I have a chance, as opposed to do them digital or Photoshop. And at the time here I was doing that project, I was not that deep into Photoshop. So I was still very traditional in my approach. And because it's advertising, you have to propose tons and tons of different ideas. And so this was one idea out of maybe 15, 16 different creatures on the same subject, exploring different takes to see how, the art director would react to it for their commercial. I don't even know if a commercial was ever made, to be honest. I mean, I never saw it. Tried to do some research at some point, but I never saw anything. So it's very possible the commercial never happened. But anyway, that's one of these little fun things that I love to do, when I sketch,
Now,
And
last time we
these,
were hanging out was in, I believe, Dublin, Ireland, and you were
yes,
just getting into the Disney illustrations.
yes,
You
that's
remember?
another.
And you were very excited to
It's
start doing
it's
these.
it's an interesting story, and that's what I talk about. Exploring new things artistically that allows you to create things you would not necessarily see yourself doing, and then you end up doing it and you enjoy it, and it becomes another another thing you love doing that you add on to your skill set, your talent. I come from animation, so that's how I started. And but then one day, way into my career at the time of Dublin, that friend of mine from LA calls me because she was doing licensing for Disney, and she was hiring artists to do all these different paintings in the Disney universe. And she approached me at the beginning and she says, would you be interested in doing some Disney paintings? And I said, no, I don't see myself doing Mickey Mouse. I don't see myself doing all that stuff, because in my head, I thought she was asking me is to do a Mickey Mouse like it's done by Disney. So, to copy something in a style that's already out there. Uh, you know, and I said, no, I have no interest in that. She said, no, you don't understand me. I want you to do what you do artistically. It's your sensibility. It's you that I'm trying to sell as an artist. But the only requirement is like it's in the Disney universe, or even Star Wars, because Star Wars had been acquired by Disney at the time. So she says it's whatever you want to do. And suddenly I got me thinking. I says, wow, man, my roots are animation. I always loved Disney. And I said, what would I do if now I could do Pooh, I could do Mickey, I could do the characters that I always enjoyed, but do them the way I want to paint, artistically, with my sensibility, with my sense of composition and light and colors and stuff. What would I do? And I started doing these paintings, and I picked up on Pooh because that's my favorite character, and it kind of actually became my signature for that collection, which is mainly for the Asian market. And I do these paintings. Were very, very different from concept. And I just love it. It's a good break when you do these very complicated concept stuff for films that could take you weeks to do, to be able to have a break and do a painting like this, which is kind of pure joy. You just let your sensibility, your imagination, sense of dreams go crazy, and have fun doing something very whimsical.
The subject matter is so different from what I'm used to from you. How long did this take you because you're saying the other stuff can take forever. How long did this take you if you had to put a
It's a
guess on it?
question it's a question I touched on the Q&A in the class. It really depends on the subject, but I would say painting like this, a few days, because it's very organic. I mean, look at the flowers and the grass and the clouds. I mean, it's not very complicated in terms of architectural, and there's not a need for concept design to find interesting shapes, something that's very unique. So it's just about what everybody knows. I'm just doing it in a more painterly way because I want to play, with a brush, and I want to explore something that breaks away from what I'm so doing every day in terms of very detailed, precise paintings for film. So paintings like that, they're usually very quick to do. And that's the pleasure too, because, I can take a quick break and then go back to something that's more complex.
Only artists will pick up another piece of, another job so that they can have a break from their other work to do some more work.
Well, you touch on a very interesting subject because you would eventually, and I hope every artist goes through that because to me, it's part of the artistic journey. If you learn a skill and you're an artist, you want to be an artist, doing the same thing makes no sense to me. Artistically, you have to grow. Every artist needs to grow. And especially when you have new technologies that are at your disposal and that you have to discover, it's to your benefit to explore and break away from one thing that you know how to do well to try something different, based, of course, on your interest, your sensibility. You might be more a creature designer or more spaceship guy or more in environments or what have you, but evolving within that realm, to me, that's what makes sense. So, I like to break away from things because that also allows me to explore and almost, I would say, challenge myself, because before I did Disney, I didn't know how I would do. I said, I got to try that because it sounds fun and I can take that risk. I'll take the time, I'll take the break and see where it goes. And it picked up very well and people loved it and it became another thing. The same way when I started getting into 3D, which was much later in my career after Photoshop, which allowed me to do what you're looking at right now, which is very elaborate spaceships, which if I had to think 10 years before to create something like this would have taken me so much longer because of applying my design traditional skill to try to create something that complex would have been very difficult, very challenging, applying all your perspective knowledge, and try to even find a shape that's interesting with all the detail. With 3D right now, you could come up with ideas quick and very efficient and explore much more possibilities because you have a tool that's much more, that's much easier to use, in a process. So that's another thing too, 3D, when I saw it and I talked about that earlier. When I saw it, I knew I needed to get into it because it would allow me to be a better artist, to be able also to be more relevant because the industry was shifting towards that technology. So, if you want to stay relevant as a concept artist, so yeah, you need to kind of learn these tools that are going to help you, to do things better. This one here, that's an early cover. That's an early book cover. Again, it's like the subject, Ring World, all these books out there, the stories, a classic, Slack Foundation, read these books, but how I'm imagining the ring and that particular moment in a story where it's depicted as the character entering that area in the valley and there's this big giant sphere. It's just about my sense about how I wanted to compose it, and how I wanted to give it a sense of space and how I wanted to play with that idea. Could have done many different things. It's just my own sensibility here. When I do book covers, actually, I got to say, it's much more about light and mood, which is what attracts me the most because there's so much freedom, and I'm very attracted to light and mood, more so than I am in film because it's more about design, the design aspect of things. No, I'm always trying to infuse a interesting light and interesting mood, but the design is a big part of it. When you do book cover, less so. But I do design sometimes, when I have to create a little spaceship like the one on the right, I spent some time playing to try to come up with design that's pleasing, that's interesting, that I could imagine being functional. That's not just a big little kind of quick brush strokes to imply something. So I'm trying to spend some time, thinking about it, But that's just from my background about, being a designer in film. So can't it's like the moth in bugs, like I can't help it.
Now,
So,
when
but
I'm working on a job that's for print, a lot of times when I actually see the thing printed out, I'm like, it's too dark or it's too light or whatever it might be.
yeah,
Do you
that
have the
happened.
same kind of issues?
Yeah. Oh my God. I got a good story. The first print I ever did at the very beginning of Photoshop, when I was just like exploring, and I was playing with that software. I can't remember what name. It's a very basic software. Uh, oh shoot, I can't remember. I wish I did. But anyway, very crude, but allowed me to kind of create some environments and stuff like that. So I played with it and I create this kind of bluish, almost underwater environments with some spaceships and some structure, and I want to print it. And I'm saving on a disk, I'm bringing that to the printer, and the guy prints it out, and I'm coming back, and it looks like shit because it's pixelated and it's blurry and it's exploded. And I said, "This is terrible." And I said, "You guys did a terrible job." And the guy look at me and says, "This is your file. We printed the file you gave us." And I said, "What do you mean? I'm looking at it on my screen. It's beautiful." And I'm looking at it on paper. It looks like crap. But he says, "Well, yeah, because you're looking at it at 72 dpi on your screen. We're printing at 300 at a much bigger size. And so did you do your file at 300 dpi?" And I say, "What does that mean?" I had no idea. So I learned the hard way that yes, there is a specific kind of technical aspect to printing from what you do on a screen on a computer that makes a good print or a bad print. So I kind of learned my lessons to understand, there's a ratio and a DPI that needs to be minimum if you have a print that's going to be decent. And then, there is the RGB versus the CMYK that I had to deal with, especially the blue killer. CMYK is terrible at reproducing the RGB blue. And I've suffered on many of my covers because the printing industry wants to use CMYK. And all my work is mainly RGB. So I had to learn for book covers to start them in CMYK to get them right, and then converting them in RGB when I wanted to because there's no loss. But doing the opposite is a disaster. So you learn these technical things, the hard way, and then after a while, you know how to do it. So yes.
If I feel like, or if I know that the print is going to be on glossy paper, I tend to lighten up my painting just a tiny touch, like 5%.
Well, then I guess you're more of an expert than I am because to me, I'm just doing it. I don't think about it. Then I print it. And if it looks good on print, I said, okay, that's good. But sometimes you're right. I got surprised because, you also have issues with calibrations on your computers and monitors. And, I'm not that of an expert in terms of these exact, calibration things. So I always tend, and plus I have multiple monitors on different systems and the colors always shift. Um, so to me, actually, what I've learned is that there's an acceptable uh, there's there's a certain amount of uh, flexibility that I have with my work, especially when I do book covers and things like that. About if there's a shift in color, sometimes if a color still looks good when it shifts, it's okay because if it looks good, it's good. So if it's a little bluer, a little warmer, it might look good both ways. And I says, I have no preference, so it's whatever, comes out. But I always tend to print it to make sure that at least when I go and I do a print, it's going to print right. And yes, sometimes you're right. It's too dark. I have to lighten my blacks. Sometimes I have to do little tweaks because there's always this shift. Yeah. Well, that's
Now,
another spaceship. Yeah, that's the same project as the other one that you saw, which tells you, I mean, that shows how much fun you can have, and I'm not really a genius in 3D in a sense that, I'm not a modeler for a game company who has to think about the technical aspect of the amount of polygons, clean models, no leak, and all that kind of technical aspect, which is requirement for games. Here, I'm using 3D as a concept artist, which means that I'm very dirty. And right now, bless the internet, there's all these kit batch out there of kind of gazillion model that now you can have at your disposal, like a Lego box again, that allows you to assemble objects and create and get good ideas quickly. And again, here, what makes a difference is your sensibility, how you rearrange your species, how you create something interesting, something functional, elegant. And then again, you apply your sense of balance, compositions, designs, and all these things that you've learned that are, to me, essential, to create a good design, because, you would give that same kit bash set to different artists, they would produce something very different. So, that's the interesting thing about, how you think about and how you apply what you've learned in terms of your skills in architecture and compositions and light colors and all these kind of little things that creates and creates good design. That to me makes a very interesting difference at the end.
And at this point, if anybody wants to ask a question, they could raise their hand or they can write in a question. I'll be happy to ask Stephan. Now, these next images are very different. They're almost unrecognizable that it's from you, So let's go over a couple of these, and I'll just show the 4. And then maybe you can tell us a little bit about them.
Well, when I say my roots are in animation, here you have it. This is what I started with. This is what the first thing I was doing, when I was drawing, before I got into these elaborate paintings and book covers that I'm in some ways much more known for. That's what I did. I was doing cartoon before I was doing realistic, and it always stayed with me, and every chance I got, I love to do it, because it's part of me as an artist. I used to do that and I enjoy doing it. And again, it's one of the things that I like to be able to do it, because that gives me breaks from other things that are very different. And having these changes that you can do and with fun and joy in a process back and forth, to me that's why I always encourage students to explore. It says, if you haven't tried, try it and then see how it feels. But it's a different way to look at it, but it's not so different in some ways, because you apply the same principle of compositions, of anatomy, but you reshape it. It's a style at that point. It's a stylization you apply to a design to create a character that's engaging, interesting. If I have to take that character, for example, and think of it as an actor that I'm going to create a makeup that's going to be an actual actor, then you could do it. You extract the essence of that guy and you reshape it to something realistic. So the shift from realistic to cartoon is just a question of proportions of shape that you infuse into your design, disproportions and asymmetry and curve and things which is 200% animation stuff. That's what makes animation so, different and so fun. It's because there is a graphic and a stylistic, thing to it that you don't have when you do realistic, designs for film or even games. So, I just, I love to do that. I wish I would do that more, actually, because it's, it's one thing that I tend to not have as much in terms of clients now, because animation is now, different animals with 3D and stuff, and because, my career shifted to more films and things that are much more complicated 3D and environments and stuff like that. But every chance I got, I always jump on it, when I can.
I always found it like if I was working on live action for quite a while and my next project is animation, I found it like I needed a little time to transition my thinking back to, okay, you're not going to stylize this as much. You're not going to try to simplify these
Yes,
details as much, right?
yes,
And to do something
it's
like
true.
this, of course, there's way less
Yeah.
streamlined simplification of shapes and lines.
Yeah, plus, I mean, this is very chaotic. So it's like, it's very forgiving in terms of there's not much precision needed. It's more about composition of the image that you can read well, quickly. So it's more about color and contrast. But it's a very chaotic creature. So I was not too worried about that. Plus, it's a magic painting, which means that, you know, it's that teeny tiny at the end. That's why it has to be simple and very quickly readable because it's going to end up on a little card like this. Now I do it because I know I'd like to be able to print it as a poster, but still because the end product is so small. It's the approach for that is very different when I do magic than when I do concept, for any other kind of project because of the requirements and what it ends up being at the end. But
When
it's
did you
fun.
first start doing magic cards? Was that a little later in your career or earlier
Yeah.
on?
Yeah, it was actually quite late. Uh,
So
it
it's
was,
already super popular already,
I'm
magic.
sorry, is what?
So magic was already super popular
Oh,
as a card
yes.
game
Yeah, I mean,
already.
I came way after. So yeah, it's just I was at the Comic Con, I had my space there, my booth, and Jeremy, the art director on that project, at the time approached me and he knew my work because I already had a couple of books out, I think. Uh, but he'd seen my work and he says, would you like to do some magic card? You know? And I said, well, why not? It's like the Disney thing. It says, okay, it's like I looked at the magic work and I look at that stuff and I said, yeah, it's like it looks fun. It's a different way of looking at it. And I had to adjust because of that, because the same way you adjust from cartoon to realistic, magic I had to adjust because of the size because they
Mm.
wanted something very painterly, but also something that was going to be so small at the end. I couldn't do what I would do for a book cover, for example, or even for a film, because it had to read extremely quickly. At least to me, because otherwise it's a mess. You're looking at things you don't get it, then it's a fail. So, which is great because it allows me to also paint extremely quickly. Uh, because I also by choice didn't want to spend so much time on it. I was doing magic a little bit the same way I was doing book covers more on the side, uh, so that I was taking it at my pace, and I didn't want to take and that become a big part of my career. Uh, so I had to develop something efficient and quick and enjoyable to do, that kind of fulfill the requirements for magic. And so that was also a fun experiment. I still do it actually. I'm still doing some right now actually. There's a new set that's coming up soon, so it's different, but it's fun. I hadn't done that actually for quite a number of years. But
What
since
are
I
your
was done.
deadlines for something like this? Like, is it 2 weeks? Or
No, but well, it's an interesting thing. They give you a deadline, but really they don't keep to it. That's like uh, it's always very flexible. I mean, they always try to give you a deadline, but because there's sometimes a lot of cook in the kitchen, you try to do that deadline and you realize you could have had 2 more weeks more, 3 more weeks more. Nobody really cares. So I think they try to keep you on a deadline without being necessarily a very tight deadline. uh, so which is good, because otherwise you could run into some issues with your own the other work that you do. So
oh, it's great that they're flexible.
yes,
And I'm assuming this is another book cover. So book
yes.
covers, how how long in general do you get for that? Because I'm assuming they're a bit even more forgiving.
Yes. Well, not only that, there's always very generous deadline for book covers, which is what I love. That's why I always do them. But also, what I was mentioning earlier is book covers is about you as an artist. It's very personal. So you have a freedom of expressions and exploration that you don't have anywhere else. And also you own the work, which is great because that's work you can show, you can sell, you can reproduce, which is what allowed me actually to get really recognized very, very well in terms of the film industry because I had work I could show that showed the art directors and the directors out there who I was as an artist, which was not always easy when you're just doing one work for film industry that you can never show your work. That's harder. So I was able to kind of showcase my work right. So that's why I love book covers in many different aspects. But book covers is also its own thing. So in terms of time, to answer your question, I try to keep it between, I would say, a couple of days to 5 days, depending on the subject matter and the complexity. The more organic and the free form, or the more moody that it is, like a painting like that, for example, is all about the mood and the composition, but really it's not extremely detailed. It could look detailed, but really it's not. It's very impressionistic in terms of using very quick brush stamps and stuff to create the illusion of a city, but it's not. When you zoom in it's an impression. So these kinds of paintings take me a few days. Some that are more architectural could take more, and sometimes I involve 3D. Now that I use 3D a lot, sometimes when they are a subject matter that will allow me to explore in 3D because I want to, for a spaceship, for example, or an interesting structure that would be kind of complicated. I take the time to explore in 3D, which takes a little bit more time, but it's more by enjoyment and choice rather than necessity. But that's another book cover. So these are fairly quick to do because as you can see, it's very organic. It's all about the mood, like I was talking about earlier. The light and the mood to create these depth. I like the idea of dimensions in my work, to create a sense of scale. In environment. I mean, to me, it's important. So I like to do that a lot. And some paintings, as you can see, sometimes they're more painterly in terms of their approach. Sometimes they're more, I would say, Photoshop, more photorealistic, and that also based on the subject matter. And also, honestly, how I feel. Sometimes I feel I want to be more matte painting-like in a painting, and sometimes I want to be more like a painterly into it, and kind of add-on brush styles and things just as an explorations and for fun. So it's all about a choice.
Well, you're kind of touching on something that I want to explore a little bit further as well, because when somebody does many different things or many different kind of approaches, many different kinds of finishes, it can be difficult to understand what the client wants because, you can do a bunch of different things. Do you ever come across those kinds of issues?
Yes and no, because every project starts with a conversation with a director and a production designer or an art director. So if I'm not the art director, then I'm a concept artist at the service of a project that already has a guidelines in terms of where it wants to go visually and narratively in terms of the story it wants to tell, what's important. So I'm already on a track. So the client already knows what they want, but they're relying on you to surprise them and give you what they love about your work. So, to give you a good example, when I was working on Total Recall, Patrick Totopoulos was the production designer, and I had worked with Patrick since Battlefield Earth, worst movie ever made. So it's like, don't even bother. But anyway, that's how we met. It was great. And Patrick understood very quickly how I work as an artist and the kind of detail I can put into my paintings. But when Patrick approaches me, he's very specific. So he came on Total Recall and he says, I want to create a world that is based on that idea. I want classicism in terms of architecture, but I want it to be crazy and always upside down, because I want to create something different. So he already had very specific ideas that already fired up my brain when he was talking about. And so all that he was wanting for me says, I need the visual. I need you to represent what I'm telling you right now. It's like reading a book and trying to do a book cover out of a book. You read the words. Artistically, you understand what is needed and what the story tells you. But artistically, there is no image. So you come up with your own sensibility, and an art director will pick you because they already know what kind of work you do. So they know you're a very detailed guy, or a guy who does this kind of stuff that has that sense of design, and that's why they pick you. So there's no confusion in that. It's easy. And every project that I've worked on, there's always that conversation. So sometimes you have more flexibility because the director is not so sure what they would want. But there's always a nugget of an idea, or something that gives you a beginning to explore. When you have less, you propose more idea, and then the director responds to that. And they say, I like that, or I hate that stuff. Good example, Spielberg. When I was working on Ready Player One, production designer calls me, and it's funny. And he says, love your work, and we would like you to explore these cities, landscapes. It's in virtual reality, the IO world, if you remember the movie. But he says, Spielberg does not want anything like what you did on Tomorrowland. And he says, absolutely not that. So he had no idea what he wanted, but he was very clear about what he did not want. And so he was pointing out at my work and says, this is not at all interested in that, this kind of architecture, this kind of the future architecture and stuff. He hates that stuff. But he wants you, and he wants you to do something he doesn't. So he explored, obviously, and you're going to propose ideas, and some are going to fail because you don't know what he wants, and he doesn't know himself. And until he sees something, then you explore. And until there is a winner or not, that's the process. So you get it both ways, from different people.
Is there a franchise or a director that you have not worked on or with yet that you would
Oh,
love to
yes.
work
Yeah.
on?
No, I'm not the one and only out there. No, I mean,
I know,
there's
but you've
a lot of
worked
people I
with
would
so
love to
many
work with.
people.
I mean, I haven't worked, for example, with Ridley Scott. I haven't worked with James Cameron. So just these two. So I would love to work with Villeneuve, for example, because I love what he does. I love his sense of design. And I've worked actually with him on a completely different architectural project for a theme park and stuff, which is funny. We met that way. And he says, I'm a big fan of yours. I'm a big fan of, and I say, I'm a big fan of you too. But we haven't found the project yet to kind of connect and work together. So yeah, there's quite a few directors out there that I'd love to work with. Might happen one day, maybe not, we'll see.
Right on. Well, this has been amazing, Stephan. It's always wonderful to chat with you and spend time with you, and especially ask all the questions that I want that are, mulling around in my
Yeah.
head. I have one last question for you, and that is, if you could take us in a time machine, take your your children that are not children anymore, take them into a time machine to see
Hmm.
any part of your life. You can't change a thing, but just for them to kind of see it, right? What part of course, like hopefully it revolves
You talk,
around art,
you talk
but
about are you talking about my career?
right. Any
My
part of your
career.
career. It could be a good part. It could be a bad part. It could be whatever you would like to show
Wow.
them, just for that they can
Yes.
experience it.
I would say at the very beginning when I was in art school in Paris, because it was a hell of a fun time. and I was young, and I had no clue about what the future held. And I was ready for anything. And I was in Paris, which I loved, and I didn't know Paris at the time. So I was in a great city with great friends, learning art, uh, left and right. I was really actually much more interested in becoming a comic book artist at the time. I didn't know my career would be what it is today. Uh, and also, I guess, uh, to give a sense to anyone about how different it was before, compared to what it is today in
In the
terms of,
1000s.
yes, in terms of how we thought about things, how we made things happen without the technology we have today, and the opportunities and the information that is overwhelming around us. Uh, there was a certain sense of uh, what is say in French, je ne sais quoi, it's like it's like looking at the world, but you don't know, so you take it one step at a time, almost like I would say French way, but and the social aspect was very different because there was no internet, the social media didn't exist, so you approach things, you learn things very differently, and I think it's a thing that is worth looking back, go back and see, to see how it was before. Well,
Fantastic.
that was a complicated painting, this one. Yes. Yeah.
Was this
Anyway,
for which film was this one for?
Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah. That
Ah,
was one of the idea of a spaceport, that was explored, that was actually never used. Also briefly that you never see, but there was that idea of creating this very elaborate kind of container spaceport where craziness happens. All these things are being coming from all different galaxies. So that was kind of challenging, very challenging. But that's one of a shot that never made it into the movie. But that happens. That's very common. But still fun to do. Yeah.
fantastic. Well, I will want to, of course, respect your time, Stefan. This has been fantastic. I'm going to stop sharing right now. Uh, very excited about your course, concept art, creative process with Stephan Martinière. Everybody should definitely check it out on schoolism.com. Thank you to everybody that joined us in the interview, in the live interview. And of course, the biggest thank you goes to my wonderful friend, Stefan. Thank you
Well,
so
thank
much for
you.
your
It
time.
was a pleasure. I hope it was enjoyable for everyone, but it was definitely a pleasure to be here for 2 hours.